My name is Andrew Lundgren. I'm the Medical Response Manager for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon and Shamrock Shuffle. On race days, I'm responsible for 6 different areas. Those areas are the pre-finish area, the CoTeam, the sweep team, urgent care, spotter towers, and the triage team. The first group I want to talk about is going to be the pre-finish group. The pre-finish group came to be because research has shown that the highest probability of a catastrophic cardiac event is likely to occur in the last mile of the race. So we wanted to deploy teams that could respond in an instant if there was any type of major cardiac event. In the last mile, we have approximately 20 teams of somewhere between 2 and 3 individuals. Those 20 teams are separated, so we have 10 on one side of the street and 10 on the other side of the street. They're a combination of licensed healthcare professionals as well as students. Not every one of those teams is embedded with a radio and an AED. You can see as you look down here towards the finish line, we have a pretty clear line of sight. So we can stagger these teams about every 100 yards or so, and they can see each team that's there. If a major event were to occur, we can have those pre-finish teams race to the area. When you see that going on, the radio can be used to summon additional help, and we can get the AED to that person with the goal of doing so in under 30 seconds. Another benefit we can have of having multiple people on a team is that you can be in a designated area, so you're responsible for that 100 to 150 yards. But if you see the potential for runner distress, the person is still moving, you can walk laterally to them on the side, and we call it a handshake. Whereas the runner is coming up and you approach the next group, you can just point to that runner and say, please monitor this person as they continue along. I do try and stress with my group, their intent here is if there is that major event. People that require Band-Aids, ice, they've run 25.5 miles. They're going to be able to make it to the finish line for the rest of those things. But we think this is a critical piece, and it's something that we respond to what the research says is we needed people in this area. Okay, the next group I'm going to talk about is the CoTeam. They are the big fish in the pond. They are right at the finish line. There is a section of approximately 30 yards right at the finish line, and they are the only members that are allowed to be in that area. When I say big fish in the pond, what I mean by that is they have eyes on every single runner as they cross the finish line. So it doesn't matter if you're a large event or a smaller race. It is important that you have an appropriately qualified team at the finish line. You tend to see 2 types of medical events that occur right at the finish line. The first one would be the runner's collapse. And what that is, after they've been running for a long time, their muscles in their body have been pumping the fluid through up to their heart and brain. But when they stop, after running a long distance, if they're not using those muscles, then you lose that pumping action and all of the blood will pool in their feet. When that happens, they can go ahead and collapse. So what the CoTeam is trying to identify, is this something that you typically see at the marathon, or do they have something potentially more serious? If it is a cardiac event, what they can do is take that runner and they bring them right off to the side. We also have an ambulance flatbed golf cart that's right here, and they can come outside the actual finish chute and bring them right into the medical tent that's further down the road. So they're there to identify that major event. Getting back to the previous one, when it could be that runners collapse or the runner needs to be monitored further, the CoTeam articulates with the next group, which is the sweep team. So what happens if the CoTeam identifies that there's some runner distress, but not so significant that they immediately have to go via the ambulance, they can handshake, which we mean, what we mean by that is they pass that runner off to the next group, which is the sweep team. That sweep team will go ahead and take the runner and then walk with them through the chute as the runner begins to return to their normal metabolic state. The next group that I'm going to be talking about is the sweep team. That is the group that is immediately downstream from the CoTeam. So you can see the finish line that's behind me. The sweep team, they form a single line through the center median, the yellow strip that you see down the road. This team is comprised of numerous individuals. Depending on the race, a large event like this, we can have upwards of 100 people as part of this sweep team. It's a combination of primarily students, but also some licensed healthcare professionals. Their job is to sweep or move the runners through the finish line. We want to prevent bottlenecks that are in the area. As I mentioned before, a lot of the runners, when they first cross the finish line, can be a little bit disoriented. We want to make sure that we are intervening. So I task these sweep team members with going up to the runner and triaging according to their credentials. What they want to do when they intervene, it's a good idea to go ahead, grab the runner around the shoulders, around the waist, and you just start walking with them, giving them some support. I ask them to have a conversation with the runner, in essence, take a very brief medical history. Ask questions like, have you ever run a marathon before? Does this feel like your previous race? As they continue to walk them through, some indications that we think something more significant is going on is if the runner can no longer support 50% of their body weight. If that were the case, we want to go ahead and get them in the wheelchair and expeditiously bring them downstream to the medical tent. We have wheelchairs staged at the spotter towers all throughout the area. I do tell the staff working this area that if you put somebody in the wheelchair, you again have to be concerned about that runner's collapse because now they are not using their muscles at all. Reverting back to when they're just walking the runners and they're taking that medical history, if we notice that there is an altered neurological state or some other signs and symptoms that would indicate a visit to the medical tent, they would continue walking them, and when they get to the medical tent, which is located approximately 300 yards further down, they can immediately turn that person right into that area. The next group that I'm going to talk about is the spotter towers. For a large event like the marathon, we have between 30 and 40 of these spotter towers, both in the secure area in the finish line chute, as well as the unsecured area once the runners have exited into the larger park. For smaller races, it's probably not necessary to have that quantity of spotter towers, but it is a good idea to have them. The reason being, when you're in the finish line area, it can be very congested. So even though we have the sweep team and triage teams on the ground, a lot of time there's so much congestion you can't recognize runner distress even when it's occurring 20, 30 feet away from you. So the spotter towers serve as our eye in the sky. Each tower is staffed with two different individuals. One has a bullhorn, the second one has a radio. If somebody in the tower recognizes that there's some runner distress, what they are doing is they're trying to visualize some of the medical personnel on the ground. Those individuals on the sweep team and part of the triage team are recognized by the red vests that they are wearing. And so if the individual with the bullhorn recognizes the distress and sees a medical individual on the ground, they can use the bullhorn to go ahead and announce, runner down, runner down, runner down, trying to draw attention of that medical personnel. When the medical personnel looks up, they can go ahead and point right down on the ground, and then they can go right to that area. As mentioned before, sometimes it's too congested and you can't even see the medical personnel. So the redundant system that we use, the second person in the tower also has a radio. They are communicating to some of the triage teams that are on the ground. If they see that runner distress, we have a radio script that they use that they will go ahead and indicate. We have a runner down, and they indicate the location by light pole numbers. We have all of the light pole numbers all throughout the area here are numbered. It's an advantage that we have at this race. If it is a smaller race, you could very easily put some stakes in the ground to indicate certain locations. So that spotter tower sees an issue that's going on, they'll call for the medical team and say, please respond to light pole number C680 or whatever that number would be. When they go ahead and the medical team gets on scene, they'll go ahead and close out the call that they are there. Another purpose that the spotter towers serve is they help with the flow downstream. We encourage them to congratulate the runners and tell them to keep walking. That's to prevent the bottlenecks that are occurring in the area. Being up high and very visible, it's not unusual for the runners to go ahead and ask questions. So I also task the towers of knowing where's gear check, where's water. A lot of people want to know where the beer tent is as well, so you can direct them to where that is. Another responsibility the spotter towers have is to secure and monitor the wheelchairs. As stated before, the sweep team, that's the ground team in this area, will occasionally need wheelchairs. We stage them right here at the tower. So if they need it, they can immediately come over. These wheelchairs have flags on them, so they're up high, which helps identify where they're located. Some more equipment that is located on the spotter tower is some bioabsorbable powder. That is used if there is any vomiting that's in the area, so we can quickly go ahead and get that cleaned up. Those are the primary roles that the spotter towers serve. We employ 9 different triage teams. These teams are made up of 5 to 8 individuals. It's a combination of both licensed healthcare providers as well as students. Each one of these triage teams, there is a member whose sole responsibility is to monitor the radio. So they are the individuals on the other end of the radio that is talking to the people in the spotter towers. So when the spotter towers identify that there's some type of runner distress and they're making the radio call, we need these triage teams on the ground to be able to respond. We have them spread all throughout the finish line area and the secured area, as well as the unsecured area. From year to year, we try to monitor where are these medical events coming from. And we can go ahead and adjust both the locations of our spotter towers, as well as where we deploy the triage teams. We always try to use a goal, and anytime that there is a call for runner distress, we have a triage team on site in under 60 seconds. These teams have minimal supplies in terms of wound care, but they can intervene there. The triage teams also have AEDs with them. So if the call comes out, we can have that AED on the runner, hopefully in under 60 seconds. The last area that I oversee is urgent care. What I have behind me is our main medical tent. We are located approximately a quarter of the mile from where the finish line is. It's important that you have your medical facility displaced a ways away from your finish line. This allows the runners ample opportunity to cool down so that they can recover a little bit, and you can make a better assessment if a medical intervention is necessary. So as the runners are coming through, they may be brought to this area. It could be by the sweep team that is walking them. It could be by the triage teams, perhaps in one of our wheelchairs. Regardless of the manner in which they come here, when they get to the front gate, they are going to go ahead and be evaluated by one of our triage team leaders at the front. They are going to make a quick assessment over what type of medical needs does this person need. If it is something lower level, we have created the urgent care, which is off to the side. What we've recognized is a lot of the people that come don't feel great, but don't feel terrible. It's enough that we need to keep eyes on them for a little bit. So instead of letting them continue down the finish chute, we can bring them inside and monitor them for about 20 minutes, see if they return to normal. We can also do basic treatments, Band-Aids, ice bags, sometimes we have muscle cramping. But after that 20 minutes is when we make a decision, are they going to be discharged to go home, or do they need a higher level care in the medical tent? Within the medical tent itself, we have 2 different levels. We have the cots, approximately of 100 of them in this race. Probably not that many is needed for smaller races. We also have an ICU that's in there, if that is required. This is generally the last stop of where runners would ever possibly end up during the day. So just to recap how all the different parts of this machinery work, the first medical team that they could intervene with prior to the finish line is pre-finish. They have eyes on the runners until we get to the CoTeam. The CoTeam then does an assessment and passes them to the sweep team. The sweep team is moving them through the area. We still have the spotter towers that are all through the finish line area, as well as the unsecured area. If they see any type of runner distress, they can call the triage team, where they would go ahead and respond. And if the triage team needs to bring them to the medical tent, they can either do it here at our main medical tent, or we have a smaller medical tent at the end.